Men women of Reddit who went out to buy cigarettes milk and never came back. Do you ever think about the family you left behind? Do you send them money or regret leaving? What made you go? Throwaway account. I am the father of 2 boys. I am in my early 30s. I have not seen my older son for the better part of 2 years, and there is no other reason than being selfish and having a perceived image of him being better off. Backstory. I grew up with a single mother who told me my entire life that my father was a womanizing deadbeat and all men were scum. She has a prescription drug problem and is manic depressive, even going to far as getting locked in a psych ward for weeks on end in my teenage years, leaving me to fend for myself. I grew up thinking no child really needed a father and I was never going to have children. Cue my early 20s, socially apathetic recreational drug user. I met a girl online and through our common misery we wound up living together. A child gets conceived. Abortion is contemplated. Lots of tears and arguments and changing of minds for both parties. Shortly before he is supposed to be born we break up. He gets born and we decided to give it one more try. It doesn't last 2 weeks past his birth. I do my crap. Drink, work, sleep, drink, work, sleep, get older, wiser, meet another woman, have another son. See my older son sporadically at this point. Keep telling myself that he doesn't need me in his life, that he has a loving family that takes care of him and he doesn't need the steaming pile of resentment and trouble that is daddy's. Get my crap together. Take loving care of my and younger son. He is the light of my life, but every day he reminds me of how I am failing his older brother. Reach out. Met with backlash and bulls. Get angry and distance myself more. Current day. Keep my distance now. Try to call once in a while. Try to convince myself that I should get involved. Inevitably avoid it after long inner monologues through which I create self-serving bulls reasons that don't do anything but feed my fear of negative backlash. I know that I can fix this and that I should fix this. Fear and selfishness about the life that I have worked to build are standing in my way. I don't need pity. I have plenty of that for myself. This has been cathartic. Daddy loves you, B. My dad left the day before my 5th birthday. He was a translator, and he somehow convinced my mom to move to Paris because he had a job at the embassy there. Turns out, he had a mistress in France that he met in America during one of his gigs. Whenever he had a business trip, it was actually a vacation with this woman. There was never an embassy job. My mom was wising up to this, and my dad was getting lazy. She found a receipt for a bouquet of a dozen roses from a store in Greece and confronted him about it. The day before my 5th birthday, he decided to cash out all of our bank accounts and leave without a trace. We sold our house, car, excess possessions, etc. before moving to Paris, so we had only what our tiny apartment had in it. Some clothes, and some party supplies for my 5th birthday. We didn't have the party. We left for America that day on a loan from my grandparents. We ate my birthday cake in silence for breakfast before leaving for the airport. I still remember releasing the bright red balloons that were supposed to be for my birthday party into the sky one by one as my mom cried the night she found out. That was in 2000. He never sent me a letter, never called, never apologized. Last year, he died of liver failure related to alcoholism, a lot of prescription pill addictions. I only found out after the Social Security Administration contacted me to confirm that my father was dead. As far as I can tell, I just don't think he wanted to accept that he lost his magic touch with the ladies. The PI I hired to find records of his life from 2000 to 2014 show that he lived alone in capital cities across the globe. Eerily enough, I now have 3 half-sisters who have my exact same name who were fathered by my dad, by different women, of course. There's no records as to why my dad was so crazy about my first name, and now that he's dead, I can't ask him. After all he put my mother and I through, I don't really care about money or apologies or whatever. I just want to know the significance of my name. My ex abandoned my son. We have talked about this a lot throughout his childhood. Trying to keep it age appropriate is tough, but it was important to me that I address it openly so he wouldn't be damaged. I was so hypersensitive in his early childhood, I edited out any experiences that might make him feel different or sad. Books that said mom and dad went bike riding became mom and uncle. I didn't sign him up for football or Boy Scouts, etc. Later I met my now husband, who became my son's adoptive father. Their relationship now is great, but at first, it was rough. What a slap in the face to learn in all my editing and censoring. I had raised an undamaged, happy child who literally had no clue what a father's role in a family would be, why having one around could be nice, etc. Not a clue. It was amazing to realize that I thought I was filling this hole left by his abandonment, only to realize he had no holes at all, and he had to work to make space for someone new in his life. I know it's only my opinion, but in my eyes you tried your best and did the right thing. Mistakes happen to us all and we all try our hardest. Good on you. Thanks. My half-brother was told when he was 10 that our father had abandoned him and his mother with the express directive that he never contact his father again. They moved to his mother's home country and never returned to the US. My brother grew up believing his father had abandoned him. It wasn't until my brother's 18th birthday that he learned the truth. His mother had fled when her husband, my father, discovered she was having a string of affairs with other men. They divorced, and she chose to return to her home country. When she left, she promised her ex-husband that she would send their son back on vacations and for visitation. But as soon as she was outside the US, immediately cut all contact with my father. Despite this, his father continued mailing letters to my brother's grandparents every week for the next 8 years. He also sent money to pay for school and my brother's expenses to make sure he was taken care of by his mother. He would try to call whenever he had a working number for his ex-wife, but was never allowed to speak to his son by phone. My brother's mother used him to extort money from his father for years with promises of visitation or phone calls, but never delivered. His grandparents never gave my brother the letters because his mother forbid it, and any gifts my father sent were credited to other members of her family. Her siblings warned my father that trying to visit or find his son would result in an accident. When he was 18, my brother decided to find the monster who abandoned him. When he found his father, he discovered a man with a new family, a new wife, my mother, new children, including myself, and a happy, prosperous life. I've never asked my brother, but it must have been devastating to see everything he and his mother had been denied. When he confronted my father, he didn't believe any of my father's claims. It was only when my mother produced records of Western Union transfers, photocopies of old letters, gift receipts, and phone logs that he learned the truth. When my brother approached his mother, she denied all of it, but his maternal grandmother confirmed the entire story of what really happened. This was nearly 30 years ago, and today my brother and father have a very strong relationship, but I can't imagine how hard it must have been for the both of them. I moved out when I was 18 to go study in another city. The first few months I kept contact with my family mainly because they were paying for my apartment. But then I found a job and I just slowly stopped talking to them. The last time I ever spoke to them was the day I signed the papers to change my name. Thereafter I switched apartments and changed banks, phone, insurance, etc. My brother has tried contacting me a few times, but I've been forced to ignore him since I do not wish to see my family again. I left because I had been so psychologically hurt by my family that I couldn't stand spending time with them, let alone see them. Throwaway here. This is pretty hard to write about, so I'm just going to spit it out without too much concern for grammar. My son's mother was horribly abusive to the point that I lost everything that I had going for me in life, and I mean everything. When she decided she wanted to be with another man, I had nowhere to go, nothing of my life left to return to. I tried to cope by picking up the pieces for a little while, but having to send money to a household, which included my ex's new man, that I was no longer a part of while having absolutely nothing left to live my life with, was just way too much to handle. My son had a new father, I had no means to live a life I could cope with, so I cut my ties and never looked back. It hurts, like freaking heck. There's not a day that goes by that I'm not in pain from leaving my son. I know that I was a good father to him and that I had a lot to offer him, but I can't live in heck 24/7 for him, and I don't want him to see what being with his mother did to me. I don't want him to know that it's possible for a man to be so completely destroyed by a woman. I want him to see that there's something to strive for in life. If I'm gone from his life, he'll be able to try to succeed without worrying about ending up like me. I keep reading these posts and I can't understand why some people feel an attachment to these deadbeats. To me, family is just a coincidence and I have no connection or obligation to stay in contact if I no longer want to. I have a terrible mom who abandoned me to the state at 13. An estranged brother and a sister who goes between missing and rehab. My deadbeat dad is literally a stranger and I wouldn't visit him on his deathbed. My psychologist told me about a new patient she once had who had untreated bipolar disorder. Apparently, he told his wife he was going to run to the store for a few items and just kept driving. Ended up in Colorado, from Indiana. I'm not sure how long he was gone for, but eventually came back and started getting treatment. People with bipolar disorder experience both depressive episodes and manic episodes. Mania causes the individual to take risky, impulsive chances that can cause serious problems. It sounds like he was experiencing mania and impulsively drove to Colorado on a whim regardless of the consequences. My mom's dad walked out on her mom after 3 kids. One day he just told my grandma that he didn't want to be a father or a husband anymore. Every couple years, he would send them a birthday card with some change tapped inside. But that's it. Eventually, my grandma remarried a great guy who did his best to treat my mom, her sister, and her brother like they were his own kids. Today, it's rumored that he's really sick and he's sad because no one's around to take care of him, but that's his fault. My dad was a really abusive drunk and took off one day after a blow-up fight with my mom. He left me and my mom and my sister. I was 4 and sis was 7. I didn't see or hear from him till I was 15ish and my mom and I were living in a crappy neighborhood near a homeless shelter. Sister got married at a really young age and moved out. Anyway, I was at school and my mom was coming out of our apt and dropped a bag of garbage down the stairs. Some homeless dude saw this happen and rushed over to help her. Turns out, it was my dad. She told him to beat it. He never paid a cent of child support and we had a restraining order because of his abusive past. I never saw him that day, but mom told me about it. It made me feel weird that my dad had been near my house. Cut to a few years later, 21, and I was living in New Mexico. I found my dad on MySpace. He was a painter, me too. But all he painted was naked women and pictures of Jesus with his face. Said he couldn't get in contact with me because the governor was watching, so I didn't talk to him. Last year I found him again on Facebook. He said was a bad daughter and my mom was the reason he was never around. That she kept us from him. The last email I sent him said this was the last time I would contact him. That all we should share was DNA. Last I heard from him, his current GF contacted me and told me he was having open heart surgery right after Christmas. I thought about it. I don't care. I don't care if he dies or if he is sick or whatever. He was never there. HW didn't see me graduate, or meet his first granddaughter from my sister, or see me get engaged to a man that is so much better than him that it's like an entirely different species. So, yay. I'm glad he left. And overall, I'm pretty sure he is glad he left too. A year and a bit ago, I left for London and never went back to either of my then homes, my partners or my abusive fathers. I don't have much of a family, so I don't think about them much, though I sometimes wonder what it's like for my dad being alone at home. He is a widower. I don't regret leaving at all. It saved my life. It made me a far better person, able to love the world and able to love people and myself. After I was born in NY, my parents split up and I was taken by my mother and moved to UK. When I was 2 years old, my mother's father called my dad and demanded that he come pick me up because I was not in a safe living environment. The two greatest people in my life, my dad and my grandfather, jumped in the car and began a drive straight to Oklahoma. When they arrived, they said my mother was drunk or hungover, and I was stuck in a crib and filth. They spent a total of 30 minutes collecting me and my things before driving straight back to NY. They may have saved my life right then. I joined the Marines and deployed to Iraq in 08-09. When I returned, I decided I wanted to meet my mother and managed to locate her. I arranged to spend a week with her at her new home in Texas. I cut the visit short after hearing shootouts between local gangs and finding her dealing C to her maids. I was more afraid for my life in those few days than I was in my entire Iraq deployment. I found out sometime after that she was arrested on weapons charges. To me, I don't have a mother. My dad has been more than strong enough to raise me with my grandparents' help, and there isn't a single thing I would have changed. It's because of him that I put 150% into my kids every day. I worked in special education at a program for 18-21-year-olds. One day the mother of a kid who was particularly handicapped, completely dependent on others for support, could not speak more than a few words, and was not fully aware of when to go to the bathroom, decided to get up one day and leave the family and never allow them to have any contact with her. The thing was, before this happened she was an absolute model parent, would sit in every meeting, polite to the teachers but always had her child's interest at heart, would volunteer at every opportunity. I really cannot say I blame her. She had been taking care of this kid for his entire life and really could not look forward to anything else until her own death. I really feel the worst for the father since he took over the duty of taking care of his son but no longer had a partner to share the stress with. I know the post was supposed to be from the point of view of the family or the person leaving, but I thought it is an interesting situation. Frick it, why not? It should be a halfway decent read. I've never learned the whole story, but when I was roughly 6 months old, my dad up and left to California. My mother and him got married at 18 or 19 because mom was pregnant with my brother. Dad also got the town W pregnant and I have a half sister a few months older than my brother. I've met her a few times. I've always been told that he was a jerk, only wanted to work, disrespectful, etc etc. The first time I met him he came back to see us when I was 4 or so. I remember playing Super Nintendo with him. When I was 6 or so, my brother and I got flown out to California to visit him. Ensue shopping spree to Toys R Us and a very irritable dad. I remember visiting him at his work. Every year he would call for our days and for Christmas. The call would last about an hour and I remember looking forward to it like nothing else. Always hoped he would call more frequently. We went out to see him when I was 10. Had to do chores. He worked for most of it. I remember my brother and I had to clean and wax his F450 while they were at a neighbor's party. Stepmom and 2 half siblings now. 7 more years of 2 annual phone calls. Went out to visit him. Got there and the next day was doing manual labor while constantly jetting my butt chewed for not knowing how to be a pipe fitter. Stayed till I was just about 19, then went back to mom. He's doing very well for himself but I refused to speak with him. He was unsupportive for over 20 years of my life. Always cold and disinterested. It's easier to just act as if he's not there. I went 20 years just wanting to know and be loved by my dad but I never got to know him, and when I finally moved out there, I had to work and that meant getting my butt chewed for not knowing construction. We would work 70+ hours a week and my lunch break consisted of so and SOS getting apart from the truck. Get your sandwich and eat. There's a point where you realize the cost benefit and that the guy who helped to make you doesn't care for you. Sometimes the idea of a dad is nicer than actually having one. Ensue playing of the world's smallest violin. I walked out on my family, left behind my mother, father, and 3 younger sisters. One day, something just snapped. I had been working, living at my parents' home, didn't have to pay rent. We never fought, and I would cook dinner for them some nights. I had about 6k saved from working 2 jobs. The plan was to use this for college. On the way home from work one night, I threw my cell phone out the window and drove off. 4 towns over I put a ski mask on and withdrew money from an ATM. I took as much as I could out, and then kept going. Over the next 3 days I took almost the entire amount out. I had to go into the bank to shut down my account to keep charges from cropping. After that I headed to a small town in the Midwest. I sold my car, gave up my driver's license and let my passport expire. I bought a pay-as-you-go cell phone and worked at local farms. That was 8 years ago. I was 20. Since then I have knowingly dodged getting found once. A stranger came to town and was asking questions, and a few phone calls later I was headed out of town on a borrowed motorcycle. I didn't stop until 2 states later. My employer never asked questions. I don't know why. It took me 2 months to get to the point where I could return the motorcycle. Now I have a steady farm job, and I'm working on changing my name. I'm hoping they've stopped looking, because it's a matter of public record. Nothing of my old life remains. I changed my hairstyle, the kind of clothes I wear, and the music I listen to. I'm a brand new person now. I regret leaving sometimes. I lay in bed at night and stare at the ceiling and realize everything I gave up to be here and I don't know if it's worth it. Am I happier? I don't know. I wasn't unhappy in my old life. This is just different, I guess. Long and short of it, my opinion is that everyone's circumstance is different and they need to examine the why before they leave. Don't do what I did. Don't just walk out. You have no idea how hard it is to think of going back. The shame of seeing my family and having no way to legitimately explain myself is so heavy. It weighs me down, and I will never outrun it, I think. I should probably create an anonymous account, but frick it. My sister is a drug addict, always has been, always will be. Went to rehab when she was younger, court ordered, met some loser and just went back to her old ways. Second attempt at getting clean, she moved to a different city. She met some other loser, a pimp to be exact, went back to drugs and then got pregnant. She stopped doing drugs once she found out and tried to make it work with said loser. Once the child was born, the father said she was not hers because she was not black enough. Sister is Scottish native. Father is Caribbean. She moves back and gets her own place. The father has seen her twice in 3 years. The sister starts doing M again, to the point of where she cannot take care of her daughter. She drops her daughter off at the grandparents' house so they can take care of her. She used to visit every week and call and tell her goodnight. Now the daughter is lucky enough to see her once a month, in which she is usually strung out. She's been in and out of jail and is probably heading back there soon. Her daughter often spends a lot of weekends with me so I can give the grandparents a break. She often calls me mum, and one time asked me why I could be her mum. She is 3. I honestly do not understand how someone could just leave their own child and have no empathy for them. Her mother is going to die because she chose drugs over her own child. I have a reversal kinda tale to tell. In about 1992, my grandma had a knock at her door. She opens it up and there was a man there, about 70 years old, who looked a lot like my grandpa. He said, "Hello, my name is Joe. I'm Howard's brother. Howard is my grandpa, and he did have a brother, but not named Joe." So then he explains that he'd like to meet Howard and that he would explain everything then. My grandma invited him in and called my grandpa at the bank he worked at and told him what was up. Grandpa took the rest of the day off work and headed home. And then Joe started his story. It seems that my great-grandpa, John, had another family before the one that generated my grandpa. He had 3 kids, including Joe, with a woman he'd been married to in Boston and later New York. One day, he went to work and never came home. He just left them and moved out west to Ohio, where he'd met my great-grandma Minnie. They got married and moved to California in the 20s and shortly after my grandfather was born. He'd never mentioned his old family to anyone at any time. Nobody had any idea. Great-grandpa John had been dead for about 10 years at this point, and Grandma Minnie about 5. We don't think she ever knew about his old family at all. And then there's my great half-uncle Joe and my grandpa, having a cup of tea, and sharing stories. Apparently somewhere I've got a group of half-cousins from this other family about my age somewhere in Boston or New York. I'll likely never meet them, despite having a kinda unique last name, but I'd like to. I had a weird thing happen to me. My mom had me when she was around 25. She was a traveling nurse in a different state, so shortly after having me she moved back home and met my dad, stepdad. My biological father has never been in the picture, and I never gave a crap. My mom told me when I was 7ish and I've always had a dad that loved me. Why would I bother looking for the dude that wanted me to be an abortion? The only thing I knew about my biological father was his name and the fact that he was in a NYU comedy group with Billy fricking Crystal. One night I was laying on the couch watching TV, and there was some biography channel special on none other than the fantastic Mr. Crystal. Letting my curiosity get the better of me, I tuned in twice. The second time while they were talking about Crystal's time at NYU. Of course, they're on the crappy biography channel. I saw a picture of my biological dad for the first time. I wrote some long Facebook blog post about it. This was a few years ago when Facebook had a blog function and I was in my early 20s, so I would always write these long inane, usually drunken, rants. In this specific post, I just outlined what had happened and said what I've always said: I've never bothered to look for him. I don't care. And I've never done the cliche look at the stars and wonder if the guy that didn't want me was looking at the same stars thing. Though that might not be a cliche so much as something I remember from Joe Dirt. It turns out a niece of his saw the same special, googled his name, and saw my blog post. She added me and updated me a bit on the family. She said she joined an ancestry site and saw death notice for him in the mid-90s. I asked for a cause of death because, you know, hereditary diseases and crap would be nice to know about. She said she would get back to me. I just noticed the other day that she's unfriended me. BTL. DR saw my biological dad for the first time on TV. Billy Crystal was involved. He's probably dead. It's cool though. I got a dad. I got left not once but twice. My birth father decided that at 21 he did not want to be a father, so ducked out halfway through my mother's pregnancy. I went the first 5 years of my life without a dad. I had a great grandfather, but I had questions like, where is my dad? And I would get the generic answers like, oh, he just can't be here right now. My mom married an awesome guy when I was 6. He has been the only dad I've ever known. I got to meet my biological dad twice. The first time when I was 10 and he was like, yeah, we can totally talk. But a few weeks after he stopped answering, I moved on. When I was 12, my sister, who was 4, and I came home from school to a house that looked almost robbed until we realized the only things missing were my mom's possessions. She bounced in and out of our lives for the next 10 years. I am still kinda mad at her because the reason she left was because she has a serious drug problem. She also never got a chance to grow up and she kind of hated us for that. She's also extremely emotionally and verbally abusive. I had to work through a lot of things that she said to me, but all that crap hasn't hindered me. I am in a great relationship. I am finishing my master's degree, and it gave me a lot of insight into my field. In this thread, people who were abandoned telling their stories, because the people who actually did the walking out are too chicken crap to even admit it to strangers. For everyone in this thread staying away from their kids cause they are too butthurt from their abusive cheating ex, get over it and contact your kids. If they're old enough to resent you, let them. Then keep trying. If it takes ages, let it. But keep trying. You've got no money, doesn't matter. They're far away, move. Make a phone call. How any parent can ever let their kid feel unwanted, whether they intend to or not, by a parent astounds me. From a 30-year-old kid who still isn't wanted by one of his parents. If you're not living for your kids, what the frick are you living for? My friend's girlfriend had a father who just picked up and left randomly one day when she was 14. He moved to China and started a Chinese family. Outsourcing. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.